Welcome in. This is the Early Wedge. I'm Rick Gehman, and today we are talking Arnold Palmer Invitational and all the DFS little nuggets that you're going to need for this week. Let's see who I've got. Oh, I see Nejad is here. Hello, Sia.
What's going on? I'm loving the chat already. Who was it that said, oh, it's Anthony Bailey. He says, best show on the planet. I mean, that's pretty high praise, but we're going to have to do something to earn that, I guess, today.
Well, it is high praise, but I mean, there's a whole universe out there. To just be the best on a single planet doesn't seem like much.
That's a fair point. Yeah, it's not enough of a compliment. I didn't know you were going that direction, but yeah.
Not enough for me. Mike McClure is here. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Rick. Sia, great to see you guys fired up again. I love the Florida swing, honestly, and this is one of my favorite tournaments. I love quite a few guys this week. Can't wait to talk about them.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we are going to do. Again, if you're tuning in for the first time and you're like, what in the world is happening? This is the brand new Early Wedge. We're going 5 days a week. This is week 2 of the relaunch. If you're watching us right now on the Sportsline YouTube channel, stay here. All good. You're in the right spot. This is where we are going to continue. If you're on the Golf on CBS YouTube channel, we're simulcasting over there for the next couple of weeks, but we will eventually kind of turn that feed off and ask you to come over here to Sportsline. And then, of course, for the audio version of this show and all the shows, wherever you get your pods, that's the Early Edge podcasting feed. Let's start with the golf course. One we are very familiar with, Bay Hill Club and Lodge. I remember this time last week, Sia, we were talking about how difficult PGA National was going to be. I'm not sure that bared out until late on Sunday, but please tell me that Bay Hill is going to be more difficult this time around.
Yeah, it's funny because it's not like we said it was going to be as difficult as Bay Hill sets up, but I mean, we definitely, and I think most of the sentiment was, hey, this is going to be a tough test. And then as soon as Thursday rolled around, it was like, just kidding. Like, actually, whatever the opposite of that is, that's what this is. But at Bay Hill, like, this is actually going to be a tough test. We're probably going to see a little bit more of a weather affected course when it comes to the wind. Although again, it's only Monday, but it does look like the wind's going to be a little bit more severe than last week. But honestly, this course, wind or no wind, is going to test these players. And I think it's part of the reason you see guys like Scottie Scheffler winning 2 out of the last 3 because, and we'll talk about this later in the show, but this is not a course, in my opinion, this is not a tournament that caters to long shots. If you want long shots, let's talk the Puerto Rico Open maybe tomorrow on the betting show at 7:00. But to me, you don't go too far down the board because this is such a tough test off the tee, on approach, whether it be in the fairway or out of the rough, the around the green play. And now you also have to navigate the wind conditions as well. You have to have the complete game here, which, by the way, is why. And I tout your site, Rick, not because you asked me to, because you've literally never asked me to, but it's because I love going to some of the certain things. Like I go to tee to green, that's great, but on Rick Run Good, I can go to weighted tee to green, and that matters to me a lot more. So those are the kind of things I'm looking at when it comes to a tough test like Bay Hill.
Well, thank you, Sia. The check is certainly in the mail. It'll be there in a couple of days. Mike, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're not going to see a 59 this week. You know, I think I'm fairly safe there, though Jake Knapp would have made me look silly last week if I said the same thing. This is a golf course that we see every single year. It plays consistently every single year. We should have a pretty good feel for this. How do you start assessing the desire to get guys who have played well here in the past and also knowing what kind of skill sets they're going to have that are going to find success for this week?
You know, Rick, like we talked about last week, there's a certain portion of the year where I do, again, lean into course history a lot more, and it's the Florida swing. And this is certainly one of those events that is consistent from year to year. And I think the success in history here definitely has a big impact. Just going to be looking at elite ball strikers that have played well here. And like Sia mentioned, it is interesting because it's definitely not the place that I would think of long shots, but I would say thank you to Scottie Scheffler for being so good at golf that you kind of create long shots because of the number that you have to pay on Scottie. So there are a few guys, 50 to 1 or greater that I do think can go win this golf tournament. But it is definitely a top heavy field. Should be a stark contrast to what we saw last week.
The other stark
terms of
contrast
spread.
compared to last week, Sia, is the field size. This is one of those smaller field, 70 some odd golfers. So getting to the weekend, this is one of the signature events with a cut, right? This is just like the Genesis. This is a top 50 and anybody within 10 shots. So it's likely to be the vast majority of players in this field who are going to be around for the weekend. But Sia, does that change the way that you are going to address your lineup building for this week?
Well, not really, only because, if you're playing stars and scrubs, which people typically like to do, I'm not saying that's necessarily always the prudent way, but that's what people like to do in these signature events because of the field size. But because there is a cut, and we saw it at the Genesis too, right? I can't remember how many people were cut from the Genesis, but if memory serves, it was a few more than people anticipated. So I don't think you can just go stars and scrubs and say, Tom Hoagie, I've got 4 rounds coming from him, or name the 6K or low 6K player that you like. So it definitely matters. I definitely expect to get a 6, but it's certainly not guaranteed. So you have to consider that if you're playing stars and scrubs, or whether you're playing any lineup. You can't just stick like a 6,200 or 6,100 guy just for the heck of it. It has to be one that you actually think is going to succeed on day 1 and day 2.
And that's the other thing, Mike, is those guys who are in the 6K range are, I don't want to say big household names, but if you're tuning into this show and like they are kind of household names, right? Like if you're this deep, you know who Austin Eckroat is, you know who Nick Dunlap is. So they are a little bit stronger in the 6K range than obviously what we saw last week. So it does allow for a few more options as opposed to just rolling off everybody who's $6,500 and cheaper.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think honestly what it effectively does though is it just kind of misprices Scotty Scheffler to me is what it does, right? Because you've got so many viable guys in that 6K range that at another event, I won't say a normal event, but another event would be $7,500 players. They're not. So considering the fact that you're most likely to get 6 of 6, if you're playing that guy, you're planning for 6 of 6. I think it just effectively makes Scotty Scheffler too cheap still, and probably a guy like Rory. So it's interesting with Xander because of the injury, but I think it really does kind of misprice the 2 guys at the top.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about those 2 guys at the top and a lot more. We're going to turn our attention to the cheat sheet and start going through this field tier by tier, but we're going to do it after a quick word from our partners.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship. A 16 beats a 1. From sweet to elite to the Final Four.
And we're back. Let's fire it up. The cheat sheet here. Nope. There it is. That's the cheat sheet on my website, rickrungood.com. There are 3 golfers over $10,000 this week. Scotty Scheffler, $12,000 even. Rory McIlroy, 10-8. Xander Schauffele, 10-1. Mike, I'm going to bounce this back to you here because you have said that the way that this player pool has filled out makes Scotty Scheffler too cheap. He's $12,000. Make the case for why he is too cheap.
And too cheap may not have been the right phrase to use, but easy to play. Scotty Scheffler is not hard to get in a lineup. And that is kind of what I mean by that. And how dominant he has been and how good he has been at a major, I want him to be a little harder to get into a lineup. So I think that, making a case for just full fading Scotty is really, really difficult to do. I would like the pricing to essentially get to that spot. So for me, I personally think that he is too cheap at 12K still, or the rest of the field is simply too cheap, but it's allowing for Scotty to make his way in a lineup still too easy for me.
4 trips to Bay Hill, nothing worse than a T15, 2 wins in his last 3 starts. Sia, when you look at the top of the board and you see what are likely the 3 best players in the world, Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and Xander Schauffele, how do you start splitting the differences between these 3?
Well, it's easy to put Xander on a lower tier for a couple reasons. One is because I do think regardless, he belongs on a lower tier than Rory and Scotty Scheffler. But the other thing is, like, the elephant in the room is that he's coming back off an injury, and your first test coming back from injury, I suppose it's TGL. Like, is that happening today or tomorrow for him? I can't remember.
Right now. Yeah. If you're watching live, they're about to tee it up. If you're watching this on demand, Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, Xander Schauffele played in TGO.
So, I mean, at least we get to see him, take some swings. But I don't think a lot of people are going to play Xander because they want to play either Scotty or Rory. I will say this: you can play one of those two, Scotty or Rory, even Scotty and Xander in a lineup, and get away with it. You'll just have to really speculate in that 6K range. But for me, it goes in order of the pricing. I'm going to be on Scotty Scheffler. He's going to be in a lot of my lineups, if not potentially all of my lineups. And then Rory, I'll probably end up taking mostly a pass on, but he'll be in my non-Scotty lineups. And Xander is a full pass for me. I will say this, though. If Xander is so low owned, and we'll kind of discover this to some degree on the live chat at 10:30 on Wednesday, Rick, when you and I are on that show. But if he's so low owned that it just makes sense to play him from a game theory standpoint, I don't have a problem doing that, but I just don't think he's going to be so low owned for me to do that. So it's Scotty for me, and then I probably move on to the 9K range.
I'm not ready to move on just yet because I do want to get your thoughts, Mike, on Rory McIlroy. The Arnold Palmer Invitational has been a happy hunting ground for Rory in his career. Quote, just the one victory, but basically every single year it's a top 10. It is him using his driver as a weapon. It's him putting everything together. Still not to Scotty's level, is he not?
He's definitely not to Scotty's level still. I think that the pricing difference, though, is enough that I think Rory's still going to get owned. It is, I mentioned how easy it was to play Scotty. That is true. It frees up a lot still if you start with Rory instead of Scotty, if you want to take that stance. So I think for that reason, limited field, his name, I do think he's still going to be owned enough to where I don't think I'm getting a ton of value by playing him. I think that some of the concerns for me with Rory is still going to be a little bit of the putting. I know we get change of surface when we go to Florida, but I've been a little concerned there. I, like Sia, don't think I'm going to have a lot of Rory. I'm going to play a lot in the 9s, and then some of the other builds will be Scotty builds. So I kind of am definitely going to be looking. I'm running numbers as we're talking, but I'm looking like I'm going to be under the field on Rory.
All right. Well, the 9K range offers a lot of really good options as well. Ludwig Oberg, Colin Morikawa, Patrick Cantlay are the top 3. And then they just jam a bunch of golfers down here at 9,400 and below. It's Justin Thomas, Hideki Matsuyama, Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, and Sam Burns, which is an interesting name to round out the 9K range with. Sia, how do you start looking at this 9K range here? Because we've got guys that are seemingly headed in a couple of different directions.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I did when I looked at pricing, besides looking to see how expensive Scotty might be, was to see where Ludwig was. And I was happy to see him in the 9K range. So, and by the way, it's a game, it's DFS. So we need to understand that Ludwig, we're not the only ones talking about Ludwig, right? So he'll probably get some ownership because of the fact that it is easy to build lineups with somebody at the top, Ludwig, and then you get some 7K guys and some 6K guys. But he's by far my favorite. He's going to be an outright pick for me. I'm waiting to see what the number is in the without Scotty Scheffler market, which I haven't seen yet. But I don't know what's not to like about Oberg, because I mean, he's top 10, almost every metric I ran, he's top 10. And, he's got some accuracy issues potentially, but he just checks the box in everything that I'm looking for. Outside of that, though, Rick, I hate saying this guy's name again, and I don't typically get him right. But I ask you, Rick, did we see enough at the Genesis from Patrick Cantlay to think, okay, maybe his form is restored? His history here is a little checkered. Last year, not so good, but the year before, T4, he does seem like a good course fit. That would be the other guy I would go to in the 9K range.
I'm pretty close. It has taken me a lot to get to this point. I still worry that it seems like he's not putting the entire package together, and it's something different that is bothering him every single week. I don't usually like that in stat profiles, but it's hard to argue with some of the results that he's putting up. So we've got a couple of names on the board already, Mike. You see this group of 8 golfers, and what does it look like to you?
Looks like a lot of my lineups are starting right here. I'm running a ton of lineups here, and I mean, to speak about how soft the pricing is, right, guys? Like a lot of my lineups are starting with Ludwig, Justin Thomas, Tommy Fleetwood, and some of them still have Victor Hovland in those lineups.
Wow.
And it's just, you can tell a theme as far as, how I'm building, why I'm building the way I am there. Still bullish on JT here. I think that JT, we're not seeing the price point map to how well I think he's playing right now. We know he's going to be there tee to green. Actually, in this field over the last 24 rounds, he's number one in total strokes gained, number one in strokes gained on the approach. The question is, always the question, right? Can he putt? Can he not? I think that he's going to be right there, and I'm willing to bet on JT, putting together a decent enough putting performance. So he's definitely the piece for me in the nines. And then the other one that I really think is going to get squeezed in terms of ownership is actually Hideki. I'm going to play a lot of Tommy Fleetwood, who you had pulled up there, but I think
I tried to read your mind, Mike, and I missed.
I love Tommy Fleetwood. Everyone knows that. I will play some Tommy Fleetwood for sure. But the guy that I think that it's going to be interesting on is going to be Hideki. I think that he is someone that I do want to play quite a bit here. And I don't think anyone's really going to play him relative at 93.
So let me bounce. I'm sorry, Sia, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say Decky, like if there was another name for me to mention in the 9K range, it would have been Decky. That's all.
Okay, so I'll bounce this back to both of you here. I mean, the driver has been a little bit troublesome in 2025. Obviously, he got off to the unbelievable start by winning at the Century, and he's definitely cooled off since. Is this just a play then? Let's see. We'll start with you on the significant upside, the significant skill set, the way that he generally plays at harder golf courses?
Yeah, I mean, again, when you go back to my earlier comment about, I think there's only so many people outside of just like the crazy outlier performance. I think there's only so many people that can actually win this tournament. And to me, there's like a couple of tiers of guys that can do that. And I would put Decky in that first tier because we know he can close. We know what he does on hard courses. I think he rates out just fine here. So he's a guy that I think if it's not Scotty, if it's not Rory, there's probably 3 or 4 other guys that I wouldn't be surprised at all if they won, and Hideki's one of those guys.
Is that the case, Mike? It's just like I could pull up the odds here, but like there's just going to be a scenario in which Hideki is lower owned relative to his outright number or any other metric that you want to use there.
Yeah, he's going to be lower owned relative to the outright number. I think the sentiment on just Hideki versus JT, I think it's a lot. Everyone wants to play JT, not as much on Hideki, and I honestly, in a difficult test of golf, which is what we should see here, I want to be on the Hideki side because he's much better on the putting surfaces, right? So if Hideki is fine off the tee, I think that he can hang because he's going to be better on the greens themselves. So, and no one's going to play him. So it's mostly an ownership play. And again, we don't have that data yet. It's just what I'm projecting, but where he's sandwiched there price-wise between JT and Fleetwood, I think JT and Fleetwood certainly going to get clicked more often.
Yeah, I also worry a little bit about JT spraying that longer driver that he's got in the bag. We'll see how that goes. The 8K range is really fascinating. There are a couple of really fun names to talk about, and it gets better all the way down, as I mentioned. But Josh, I think what we'll do is we'll hit that after a quick word from our partners.
Who's in? Who's out? Let the madness begin. The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Selection Show on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, here it is. The $8,000 range. 11 golfers who are, like I said earlier, heading in a lot of different directions. Sungjae Im, Russell Henley, Mav McNeely, Will Zalatoris, and Daniel Berger are the top half of this range. The bottom half of this range, that's Keegan Bradley, Victor Hovland, Shane Lowry, Sepp Straka, and then a pair of golfers at 8,000, Robert McIntyre and Wyndham Clark. Sia, you're going to get first crack here. Where do we start in this 8K range that you're comfortable with?
Well, I'll say this. A lot of people are going to be comfortable with the lower 8K range. And I say that because, again, this is DFS, and I think people should understand that when ownership comes out, it's very likely that between Keegan Bradley and probably Shane Lowry in that 8,400, 8,200 frame, maybe a little Sepp Straka, maybe some Robert McIntyre. I'm not sure about that. Wyndham Clark had a flat 8K. I think that's where a lot of people are going to live for 2 reasons. One is they're more comfortable with these golfers, and 2, the way they're building. If they're building 2 really top tier guys, the next guy they can go down to is the low 8K range. And then they start speculating in the 6K and the low 7K. So I do think that lower 8K region is going to have some ownership. With that said, I'll probably just mention the guy that I actually think is going to be the most popular guy, or at least maybe top 2 in that low 8K range. It's Keegan Bradley. And it's because talk about checking boxes, like great course history. The long irons are good, which is obviously going to be important here. The ball striking since basically last September has been very good, with one exception at Pebble Beach. I just think he's one of those guys that he needs to still kind of put the whole game together, but he also checks the weighted tee to green and weighted ball striking boxes. He just seems like a very good course fit, and that's borne out in the history.
Two exceptions. He also stinks on a simulator. And he also just hit one into a fairway bunker. Does that concern you at all, what he's doing right now on TGL, or should I?
I kind of wish I was watching that with you, but no, it doesn't concern me. It doesn't concern me at all. I'm going to chalk that up to a bad simulator. Let's go.
Definitely a bad simulator. If you look at his history around here, he's played at Bay Hill a ton. I mean, we're talking about nearly every year dating back to 2011, the ball striking numbers, the around the green numbers, and hell, even the putter works well here for Keegan, even during those down years where that was a problem of his. Okay, Mike, I'm just going to tee you up on Viktor Hovland here. I find him to be the most interesting for a variety of reasons. Let's start figuring out what to do with the Norwegian this week.
You know, he's the 18th most expensive golfer, Rick. So I think that's the most important thing for me to point out is just he's so cheap, right? For the upside that he represents. Like if Viktor Hovland goes out in top 5s this golf tournament, no one's going to be surprised. I'm not going to be surprised at all. I think he profiles well, despite the recent results really being that mixed bag. The thing that really profiles well for me, though, is just the long iron. So when we're talking about proximity 200 plus, I think he's still going to be one of the best in this field in those situations. He's had some good history around here, which I care a lot about relative to other events on tour. And it's mostly just a price point play. You can fit him in pretty easily wherever you want. And you're almost guaranteed all 4 rounds. I know there's a little bit of a cut, but Victor's definitely someone I want when I know that I'm getting all 4 rounds. And the discount here, again, skill set discounts. He's the 18th most expensive golfer. I think he should probably be about the 10th to 11th, 12th, somewhere in that range. So I like the discount on Viktor.
Yeah, one of the cheapest price points we've seen on Viktor Hovland in his career, quite honestly, especially since at least 2020 or later. Also, I think this is a touch easier around the greens with the thick rough than a lot of other places in which he could get himself in trouble. Mike, I'm going to bounce it back to you here because I set you up on Viktor. I asked you a direct question, but let me open this up to anybody else in the 8K range that you think is worth mentioning here.
How about Daniel Berger? Look, Daniel Berger is someone that I think we all kind of liked last week. He was really good at times and really disappointing at times, right? I think he sets up well again. I like Daniel Berger in Florida golf. I think that people might be a little shy going back to him at 8,500 in this field. It doesn't really feel like that big of a discount, but everything looks pretty good. The distance is always going to be a little bit of a concern for me, but just the off the tee play, tee to green, he's been 10th in this total field, 5th in total strokes gained, and good enough on the putting surfaces. So I'm willing to back Daniel Berger after a relatively, underwhelming finish to last week's tournament. I think that he's a great mid-range play here.
Yeah, struggled on the weekend, but really just struggled on the second 9 on Saturday and Sunday. The front 9 throughout the week was all quite good. Sia, I'm gonna take this right back to you here. I'm looking at this range and I see Russell Henley, who was in the mix for the longest time last week. I see Maverick McNeely, who already has a win this year. I see Sung J M, who has had plenty of success in Florida in his career. I see big game hunter Will Zalatoris right here. We have yet to talk about any of them. Can I get you to bite on some of this bait, please?
Not really on Sung J M. I mean, Russell Henley's interesting. I wish he was a little cheaper. I'm not a Russell Henley guy. I said it last week. He had a great tournament. He couldn't close, so I'm not going to hold that against him. I will hold it against Daniel Berger, by the way. My biggest lineup could have won many thousands of dollars if he just pushed on Sunday and was anywhere close to decent. But that was a lineup with Jacob Bridgman in it, by the way, who I said on this show was going to be a play at 7,000 flat. Just throwing that out there. The only other guy, there's 2 other guys I would consider. I mean, I think Will Zalatoris, I think you could speculate on him potentially. Shane Lowry's going to come up. I think people are the Shane Lowry tough courses narrative. I think he's going to get some ownership. Here's one that's left field, though. And it's really left field because he's been so bad at Bay Hill. Sepp Straka. The argument for me would be Sepp Straka is a good course fit, and maybe he's turned such a corner lately that he's just a different golfer than he was then. But it doesn't look, when you look at what he's done at Bay Hill specifically, I mean, the approach play in particular, that's it right there, right, Rick? It is horrific. But again, he does feel like a good course fit, and you know, he knows how to close, all of those things. I feel like the upside is there. The downside certainly there as well.
Was it Sepp Straka that just had that same? There was somebody like Sepp Straka who just had a profile that looked like that, where it was 4 missed cuts, and we were having the conversation. Maybe it wasn't Sepp Straka. Maybe it was somebody else. I can't remember. But I remember thinking he might just be a way better player right now. Right. We heard the way that Sia broke down those couple of names that I threw at him, Mike. Anything to add on the Sung J M, Russell Henley, Will Zalatoris, Shane Lowry's of the world?
I'm not going to play Zalatoris. I know that he is the true big game hunter. I think he always just comes with a little bit too much ownership. I've been scared off with some of the, the late withdrawals. I know that that's not likely and not something to really put some stock into, but overall just hasn't played a ton of golf. And I want to kind of avoid that situation. If he was, cheaper than Victor Hovland, I think it would start to become a little more interesting. But if I'm going to speculate in this range, I'd much rather just play Victor Hovland here.
And I think the truth is that while he's still been good since having to adjust his driver length and change his swing a little bit, he has not really been that force of nature, especially at more difficult golf courses that we got used to prior to the injury. So I do wonder if or when we will get back to that. Okay. Anybody else in the 8K range, or am I moving us down to the 7s?
You're moving us.
Going once, going twice, sold. We're going down to the 7K range here. That's going to be Tom Kim down to Cameron Young and JJ Spawn. There are some bigger names in the middle. I see Corey Connors, who has an unbelievable track record around this place. Matt Fitzpatrick has a great record up until last year, though he's been in the bit of a bind. But see a couple of newer, hotter players like Michael Kim, Ben Griffin showing up in this range as well. What do you see?
I love Michael Kim. I probably should have mentioned Wyndham Clark because when it comes to DFS, I know he's a flat 8K, so kind of in the 7K range. When it comes to upside, I do think he's a guy, like there's downside there too, but I do think he's a guy that people are going to play, and I totally get it because of the upside. And I think was he second here last year?
Second or fourth, something like that. Yes, he was definitely very much in the mix.
Second and T34 the year prior. So certainly looking good for Wyndham Clark there. Michael Kim, you have his stats up here on YouTube. Again, I don't want to go too short term with the metrics, but the good news is short-term metrics, while they're unbelievable, like so incredibly good, the ball striking's been good since last summer. It's just now the ball striking is meeting the short game, and they're getting married, and now Michael Kim is just flashing all of these great finishes. I don't really see an argument against Michael Kim, except for the fact that his name is Michael Kim, and people just don't take him super seriously yet. But I mean, I think it's a fine price, obviously. I think Michael Kim's probably going to be popular. I think he's certainly playable.
The thing I like about this stat profile is that there was an outside thing that you can point to and say that this might not be a fluke. Like you said, he's always been a great ball striker. Started working with a new coach that fixes the around the green play, puts the lab putter in the bag. That kind of fixes the putter. So like there are these outside things as opposed to just saying, I don't know, maybe he's hot right now. So we'll see, we'll see if he can continue it. But the last 4 starts for Michael Kim have been nothing short of spectacular. Mike, let's get a 7K guy or maybe 2 out of you.
Adam Scott would be the first one, 7,500. Look, I think the days of Scott going out and winning golf tournaments like this are probably done. Can he top 10? Yes, I think he definitely can. And just looking at the profile, I actually like what I see here in this field over the last 24 rounds. 16th total strokes gained, 14th on approach, 15th tee to green. I just think he should be a little more expensive in this field. I think the younger players have really started to play well enough that I think he gets overlooked a little bit here. And I think it sets up pretty well for him despite the miscut last season. And then the other one that's really kind of gross after the last 2 weeks, Taylor Pendrith. Very disappointing performance last week and T50 before that. But man, he was on a run. T9 at Pebble Beach, T7 at the Farmers, and back before that, T13 at Century, and just profiling, everything looks pretty good. He's a little bit like Justin Thomas for me. When I look at all the data here, he can't putt, and we know that, but number one in this field in terms of strokes gained off the tee to green, fourth, and then that proximity bucket that I mentioned, 200 plus, talking long irons, eighth in this field. So he's got the profile. The recent results have been an absolute disaster his last two tournaments. I think nobody is paying 7-9 for Taylor Pendrith in this field.
Yeah, there was a pretty big expectation for him around Torrey Pines. He finished his T50, and then he was actually even more popular, somewhere around 20% in DFS contests for last week at the Cognizant, and he missed the cut on the number, though. Yeah. If he made the cut on the number, maybe he's Joe Highsmith and he wins the golf tournament, but that's, I guess, in a different timeline, in a different universe. The bottom of this 7K range, Sia, has some bombers, Cam Young, Max Grazerman, also guys like Denny McCarthy and Aaron Rye, who we've seen catch fire at times. Is there anything in the lower half of the 7K range that you think is worth favoriting, you think is worth just checking in on before we start building a lot of lineups here?
So I have one at the bottom of the 7K range and one at the top of the 7K range. Okay. I was really disappointed in Denny's play, even though he made the cut last week. I could see going back to him, but I just thought he looked, I watched a lot of his play. I just thought he looked a little off last week. Maybe that doesn't translate at all at Bay Hill, but it was enough for me to probably avoid him this week. Aaron Rye, though, in the same range. Aaron Rye does feel like he's a pretty good course fit. 2023, he had putting issues at Bay Hill. I think that was mostly the result of his poor finish. But again, he kind of checks a lot of the boxes for me here. Certainly going to keep it in the fairway. The other guy at the top that is also going to keep it in the fairway, that has a lot more upside, in my opinion, than some of these other 7K guys, is Akshay Bhatia. He's got the ball striking. He's got the putting. The issue is, and he's got the accuracy, by the way, good total driving numbers. But the issue is he's never played at Bay Hill, as far as I can tell. And that, could be a problem. But if that gets a little bit of ownership off of him, along with the fact that people might want to play those low 8K guys that we previously mentioned, I think he's a really good play for DFS.
I was surprised to see that he hasn't played this. I guess as a signature event, he hasn't qualified for it in the last couple of years when he started to get really hot and towards the best part of his career. I was surprised to see that he has not played this event before. He's coming in with a scorching hot putter, the driver's well. Everything does seem to be cooperating. I will put a note before I pass this back to you, Mike. It is Aaron Rye's 30th birthday. Congratulations. Ooh. Happy birthday.
Today?
Mr. Right today, right now.
So we have a narrative. Okay. We have a birthday narrative, and it's his birthday is on 3/3.
3/3, and he's 30.
Anybody who watches the early edge knows that 33 is my lucky number. Aaron Rye, lock button. You put the mortgage on him winning the tournament without Scotty.
All right, can I put like half the mortgage on it? Like mortgage. Jeez. Okay, I'll put half the
birthday narrative and my lucky number. This is too much.
Right. The whole mortgage on Aaron Rye coming off his 9 strokes gained on approach in his most recent start. And it's his birthday. And Sia said that's a good narrative. So we are going to rock with that. Mike, anybody else here in this 7K range? There are some electric golfers. Minwoo Lee, Sahith Theegala, Siwoo Kim. I mean, that is an electric factory. But is there anybody else that we need to discuss before we move on?
In terms of fading, I will fade Sahith. I think he's fallen off a lot from the days of where he was out there competing, for wins. And just looking in this profile, I don't like that at all. I do like Min Woo Lee a little bit again. Was big on him last week. He came in nicely for me after that disastrous 71 opening round. He was the only one that played the old PGA National apparently in round one. So I like him. And then Max Gracerman, the profile is a little interesting and definitely going to be a little erratic, but it's basically in the 6K range. Does project relatively well in at least those long irons. Could be someone I don't hate playing in a lineup.
I think Minwoo was like 11 shots out of the lead after the first round because of what Jake Knapp did. He had the finishing T11, which is honestly pretty good. Played very well over the final 3 rounds for Minwoo en route to that T11. Let's keep rolling on here. Let's get to those cheapy golfers. And I teased this a little bit earlier. They are not total scrubs, and actually pretty far from it here. The top of this range is Patrick Rogers, Sam Stevens, Benny On, Brian Harmon. The middle of this range, that'll get you Aldrich Potgieter. It'll get you Christian Bezuidenhout. All the South Africans with difficult names to pronounce right in the middle. And then the bottom of this range, Jackson Koiven, still an amateur, Rafael Campos, Mackenzie Hughes, and Eric Cole has fallen to the basement. Eric Cole is $6,000. Sia, first crack is yours.
Okay. I do want to give a shout out to some of the chat. God says he'll be sleeping in my garage if the Aaron Rye play misses.
That's true. We're all going to be sleeping in your garage.
2 things. Aaron Rye, because it's a narrative play, is not an official play. And the other thing is I don't have a garage, so GAWD, the joke's on.
Oh, so we're all going to be inside on the floor. Great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Darn. Okay, fair enough. Harris English makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, especially if we're going to get weather. I mean, there's some comments about the weather. Joseph Boza talking about it as well. We'll have to wait and see, right? Because it's only Monday. But if the weather is really going to be an issue, the rain, the elements, I mean, that's like, is that not perfect for Harris English? He's got the accuracy off the tee. His approach game, not too good, especially when it comes to the mid to long irons. But if it's going to be a scrambling fest, we know how Harris English does with those. So and by the way, he has pretty good history at Bay Hill as well. A couple of other names. I mean, Nick Taylor, I don't even know what to say. It doesn't even look like his profile. His approach numbers and his finishing positions have been so good. We know he just won a little bit ago. And since that win at the Sony, he's been 12th or better. 2 other names I'm going to bring up. Isaiah Salinda, hot on approach, hot off the tee. It's a very small sample size, but I do want to point out that on the Korn Ferry Tour, he was very good with his finishes. But more importantly, last year, talking about tough courses, he was T32 at the U.S. Open. So I don't think it's far-fetched to say Isaiah Salinda, with his limited sample size, can come into a tough course and play pretty well. Finally, Jacob Bridgman, who I brought up last week. It's the mid to long iron play that I liked the last week, and that's what I like this week. He's actually gaining, especially lately, really across all metrics in a very marginal way, but gaining nonetheless. So I think he's interesting at a low price.
Yeah, he's certainly starting to beat, especially himself in his own 100-round baseline. He's putting together some really good finishes. The driver has been good. I would argue Nick Taylor's 2024 was the stat profile that didn't look like Nick Taylor. I think this is the real Nick Taylor. I think he is back, and Boomy, whatever that sponsor is on his hat. I don't know what Boomy is. Mike, this 6K range gives me a lot of different directions to go in. I'm going to need some guidance here.
A lot of different directions. I will say with CO, definitely playing Nick Taylor. I think he's going to be probably pretty chalky, though. He's just flat out mispriced here, in my opinion. So I love the approach play. I believe top 5 in this field on approach, which is pretty incredible for that price point. And then the other guy I'm going to play a lot of is Lucas Glover. Can't get enough of it. I think that obviously the distance is always going to be a concern. I think that he's got the skill set, though, everywhere else to be competitive here. When you look in terms of approach, top 10 in this field, tee to green, top 20, that proximity bucket, again, the long irons, and then the putting. I think that he's got enough on the putting surfaces to make up for some of the distance that he doesn't have. The only thing I would caution against, if we get wet conditions, I'm not so sure at that point, but we'll see. I think that Glover at 6,400 is definitely going to be in a lot of my lineups as I dip into the 6s.
Yeah, I definitely want to keep an eye on the weather report, wind, obviously, but if there is going to be a situation which this course plays longer or the rough plays even thicker than we expect, got to keep an eye on that. Max Homa this week. I just want to document this.
Yeah.
He is $6,300. That I believe I'm going through.
It has to be his lowest price ever.
Close. Definitely his lowest since January of 2020. He was 6,300 at the Century. So that was 5 years ago. He's got a couple of starts in late 2018, early 2019, where he was cheaper, but I mean, he was like 400 to 1, 600 to 1, 300 to 1. Those weeks we're talking about before he really turned into that Max Homa. So yeah, we are at rock bottom right now.
And by the way, I'm not playing Max Homa, but I wouldn't really argue with somebody who was like, he's 6,300. But it's a no play for me. Did Max Homa turn into Michael Kim and vice versa? Social media, like not playing very well, then suddenly playing super well, big on social media. Like they swap places. This is like a movie script.
Was there a Monstar situation?
It feels like it.
He's only $100 more than, and I understand these guys just won, but this is Max Homa we're talking about. He's $100 more than Brian Campbell, Austin Eckroat, Joe Highsmith, Pavone. Like that's not a world where we ever thought we would be living.
It's not a world I want to live in. I'll tell you that.
I mean, I just told you I'm excited to play Lucas Glover for more money than Max Homa at a signature event.
Yes.
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, but I can't get I'm not playing him after what I saw at the Genesis. I need to see at least 2 made cuts in a row after that. I mean, we're talking 10 bogeys, just 5 birdies. His best round was that second round, shooting a 75. Week before at Waste Management, an event that a guy like Max Homa should, excel at a little bit, I would think, right? An opening round 76 there, just uninspiring. I would not play Max Homa if they made one golfer 5,500 this week.
Wow. What would it take? What if he was 3,500?
That would be fun. At 3,500, I could then play Rory and Scotty together and still play 2 other guys in the 9s. Then, yeah, 3,500, I'll play some Max Homa.
All right, I love that. I'm going to put you guys on the spot here because the Puerto Rico Open salaries are out.
Yes.
You can play one golfer in Puerto Rico this week. That's it. One golfer. I will just to try to reset baselines and everything here. The most expensive golfer in Puerto Rico is Sam Stevens,
but he's out. Sam Stevens is now in the API.
Did he get in?
Yes. Yeah, him and Novak are in the API. They're in the 6K
Oh my
range.
gosh. All right. So as of right now, then Nicholas Norgard would be the most expensive unless he somehow gets the boost in. Ryan Gerard is in this field. Kevin Roy, Bud Cauley, Rasmus Niergaard, Peterson. This is Chan Kim is $9,300 in this field. Sia, you only get to play one golfer in Puerto Rico this week. Who is it?
Sorry, I'm going to tell you 3 because I've already bet 3 outrights for this tournament because I'm sort of irresponsible. Okay, I went with Norgard. This is after Sam Stevens, right after Sam Stevens and Novak qualified for the API. I bet Norgard at 22 to 1. I bet Rico Hoey. It was 40 to 1. Unfortunately, I caught the worst number after the withdrawals. I got him at 35 to 1. And Carl Phillips down there at 70 to 1. Give me those 3.
Hold on a second. Okay. Rico Hoey at what did you get him at? 30 something?
35, yeah.
That's actually not bad. He can't putt, but it's past Palm, so you get away with anything. And then Carl Phillips, I wanted to say, yeah, okay. I couldn't remember if he started off fast and then got bad and then had one. I knew he had one bad round. I couldn't remember if it was on Thursday or Sunday. Played great Thursday, Friday, Saturday last week. Gave a couple back on Sunday. Okay, Mike. I'm only asking for one, but you don't have to give me 3 like Sia. What are we doing here for Puerto Rico?
I'll just play the chalk. It's going to be Norgard at the top. I would play him. I am very interested just with the naming on the site because you don't see Norgard there on DraftKings. Will that impact the ownership?
Is he Nicholas
Probably not.
Yeah, they keep swapping.
They keep swapping it, but I'm curious, does it impact the ownership? I'm guessing that a lot of people that are diehard playing Puerto Rico Open the same week as the API are probably using tools and probably going to be able to figure it out via a player ID. But I am curious if that does have any impact at all on ownership.
Yeah, that's my nightmare. These guys especially when the sites are constantly changing back and forth on what are we using, what are we not using. Okay. Oof. Now the juices are flowing. We've got 2 PGA Tour events this week. Obviously, one in Puerto Rico, one in Bay Hill. Gentlemen, any final thoughts before we get out of here? Anything you want? Open season.
I was going to lament your plight with some of these European players when you type it into your database and you type in like Aubert and it's like got that thing on top of the E and like so you have to type in Ludwig. Like that's the trick, right? But it must be so painstaking for you to like have to go through that all the time.
Yeah, so I mean it's like Thorbjorn Olesen, who has that O with the line through it. Both the Højgaards, obviously. Yeah. So Mike's right. It's all player IDs, right? So every player has a unique player ID now, but that player ID is attached to like all the 7 different spelling possibilities of Nicholas Norgard or whatever. And it's all attached to one ID. But yes, it is very annoying.
Can I ask one question here?
Sure.
I know Mike's answer already because we covered it on the live show on Sunday, which by the way is 1:00 every week. Rick, do you bet the without Scotty market? Because I bet it not all the time, but I bet it, and I'm probably going to bet it this week as well. Do you bet that market?
So I have when it was like pure Scotty mania. I think it's probably a bad bet. I think it is. I think you are giving away money for peace of mind.
Yes.
So I have done it. I have stopped doing it, but it is something I think about every week.
Can I just say before Mike chimes in here, like I asked him that question and I knew the answer was going to be, you shouldn't do that because of the holds and whatever you're giving away, the price that you're getting and all those things.
Yeah.
But it's Scotty Scheffler. So I do feel like there's extenuating circumstances. I'm not saying he's Tiger Woods, but I do feel like there's extenuating circumstances to be like, yeah, I get it that I'm not on the right side of the math, but I don't want him in the equation at all. Just saying.
This is what it is. It's Scotty insurance, which is what this comment
Yes.
It's also like when they offer you insurance in blackjack, like also a sucker bet, right?
Absolutely.
If the house is offering you insurance, you should not be taking it.
It's true.
Correct.
Right? We are going to be back a lot more this week. 4 more times. Tuesday for your best bets. Wednesday for your live chat. Friday for your halftime report. Sunday for your live look ahead, in round bet, all that fun stuff. Got you covered from as many different angles as possible. Big thanks to producer Josh. He's doing all the hard work behind the scenes. That's Mike McClure. That's Nejad. I'm Rick Gehman. This has been the Early Wedge. Catch you next time.